I mean, the reality is that if we sit down and have a conversation and it's potentially, a quote, crucial conversation or a hard conversation in someone's minds, that's probably going to bring up for us as the provider, if we haven't really examined it, we're bringing our own wounds to the table, our own fears, our own traumas. We've probably been the recipient of poorly given feedback as well. And it makes us feel very, very nervous, and we're acting from a place of fear and suffering. Essentially, we're bringing our suffering to the table, and the goal is not to do that. So we can't do it until we really take that inner journey and really kind of become aware of what might come up for us in a conversation. So intention setting, right? You mentioned trying to approach feedback from the intention setting of how can I be of service and help to this individual? And we also have to come into it having set the intention of what might this bring up for me? And how am I going to be present for myself beforehand so that I can set those things aside?
Hey everyone, it's Amy Lynn Durham here, and I just want to thank you for following along and listening to the Create Magic at Work podcast. We are now entering season 5 of the podcast. We are 64 episodes in. We are a top 5% globally ranked podcast, and all of that is because of all of you listening, supporting the podcast. The mission of the podcast is to advocate for healthy leaders, healthy workplaces, and really bring some futuristic, fresh perspectives to the workplace so we can all live fulfilling lives and feel like we thrive. I can't thank you enough for following along with the journey. I'm so excited about kicking off season 5 with this next guest. We are now 2 years in, and this is marking the 2-year birthday of the podcast. The guest that's kicking off season 5, we're going to give you a 2-part series. And hopefully you're going to be so pleased when I say his name. It's Aaron Tabacco. He actually is the most listened to guest on the Create Magic at Work podcast to date. Back in season 2, he kicked off season 2 with an episode titled How to Practice Presence at a High Level. And what I thought was so amazing about that episode, there were a few things. One is Aaron's wisdom that he brought to the table blew me away, because I come from leadership, former corporate executive, where we always heard these leadership tips of listen to understand, don't listen to respond. And according to Aaron, that came from Stephen Covey in the 90s. It was really popular, and it's a great way to lead. Aaron pushes us, as all Create Magic at Work guests and listeners do, to take it a step further. Let's get this into the quantum leadership space. Let's listen to bear witness and be present and acknowledge that the other person's experience exists for them, rather than just to understand or just to respond. So that episode blew up, and it was phenomenal. Well, I've asked Aaron to come back, and he graciously did. And I'm so appreciative that he agreed to come back and be a guest. We've actually recorded a 2-part series for you on how to properly give feedback in the workplace, how to think about ways to give feedback that aren't uncomfortable anymore for you delivering the feedback, or for you or someone else receiving the feedback. So buckle up, grab your favorite cup of coffee, beverage, tea. If you're driving, get ready to hone in. If you're cleaning the house, don't miss a word, because Aaron's wisdom in this 2-part series kicking off season 5 is phenomenal. And happy birthday, Create Magic at Work podcast. Happy birthday. Hey everyone, it's Amy Lynn Durham, and you're listening to Create Magic at Work. Create Magic at Work is on a mission to equip senior leaders with tools they need to be a true quantum leader and actually understand what that means. Improve employee engagement, retain top talent, and transform your workplace culture to have less drama and stress. So let's start making magic. Hey everyone, welcome to Create Magic at Work. I am so excited today because back by popular demand, I have for you Aaron Tabacco. Aaron was a guest on the Create Magic at Work podcast. He kicked off season 2 for all of us, and his episode is by far the most popular episode of Create Magic at Work history, and it continues to be. When Aaron first joined us in season 2, he brought some really new perspectives to the table on how to be present for each other, for our teams, and how to be present in the workplace. And it was really encouraging that that episode was the most popular because it's like, oh my gosh, leaders and people are exploring this, and this is so amazing. If you missed that episode, we'll drop it in the show notes for you to go back and listen to it. But let me give you a little bit of background on Aaron. Aaron is an executive coach and the director of staff experience in the Department of Medicine at the University of California, San Francisco. A former professor of developmental pediatrics, Aaron transitioned into his current line of work 3 years ago, becoming a thought leader in the development of holistic workplaces, leadership development, DEI efforts, and internal institutional workforce research. He's a highly skilled public speaker and communicator, having been featured at numerous public and private professional engagements in his areas of specialty. Aaron has several professional publications in the US, Europe, Japan, and online, and is a graduate of the UC Berkeley Executive Coaching Institute at the Berkeley Haas School of Business. Additionally, Aaron has engaged in high-stakes healthcare and higher education conflict mediation for families and professionals over a 13-year period. He's a father of 3 young sons who live in Portland, Oregon. And Aaron also is a dear, dear friend of mine. We'll add that to the bio. Aaron and I connected, gosh, maybe, is it getting close to 3 years now? Or maybe a little over, when was it?
I do not know, but that's probably right. Something like that.
Yeah.
Somewhere in the last few years.
Yeah, we met up. We were both presenting at the UC Berkeley coaching conference, and we met on Zoom before that conference. And it was like we reconnected in this life or something for whatever we were supposed to do with each other in this life. So the connection has been strong. And Aaron, thank you for returning as a guest to the podcast to share your insights on feedback today in the workplace. I mean, this is a critical topic, and I can't wait to hear your thoughts on feedback in the workplace. Anything you want to add before we dive into that?
Oh, not at all. I mean, I'm genuinely touched and humbled that these conversations that we have been having seem to really speak to people. This world of presence. It's interesting. We all know that it's almost become cliche that we live in a world that is more connected than ever, and yet we are more isolated and lonely than ever, and really crave deep presence with others. And so it's just a real honor for me to be considered somebody worthy of listening to on the topic. So thanks for inviting me again, Amy. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what we discover in our conversation. So I'm all in.
Yeah, already you've hit me with like that paradox of we've never been more connected, yet people feel more isolated and lonely than ever before. Wow. Mm-hmm. How can we provide solutions to that? Right? Yeah. So first off, feedback in the workplace. I laugh because it's quite a topic. I've been the recipient of course, of feedback, and I've also been the person delivering it. And I think back to my 20s when I was a regional manager, or my early 30s, and the way I delivered feedback. I don't think that I had the high level skill set or tools that I might have today. So what does constructive feedback look like for you?
Well, I really appreciate that background. I really quickly, I can really resonate with that. I mean, I am 51 years old and have been through numerous career evolutions, like many of us. for whatever reason, have always found myself in positions of leadership across my lifespan. I don't ever remember anybody teaching me how to do this. I just remember people saying, "You're it." And so this is part of your job now. And kind of having to feel my way through all of it like the rest of us. So I really resonate with that. I am in a different place right now than where I began. And for me, I think I've come to understand feedback as something I want to approach as a conversation of transformation. I don't even really like to think about it in terms of constructive feedback, because that, for many people, has been kind of a traumatizing experience on the recipient end, and sometimes, on the provider end as well. And so you hear that piece, and it's almost this passive aggressive way to say, I'm going to sit here in judgment with you, but I'll label it constructive, and you'll walk away feeling, that you've been through a destructive experience, destructive rather. And I think, well, what's the whole purpose of these kinds of conversations? And in from a spiritual intelligence perspective, wanting to be a wise and effective change agent for people, what we need out of that interaction is some kind of, transformation, some kind of evolution. And if we can really learn to do this well, it can be transformative for both people involved in the conversation, which is a little mind-blowing, right? But the truth is, as I've honed and developed my own practices with this, that's been my experience. And it's really strange to think of, but when I think about my career, particularly in all of those years, I was a professor of nursing and working with undergraduate students or graduate students, or even mentoring new faculty. Some of the most spiritual experiences I've had as a leader have come from those conversations. So I know it's possible, and my hope is that we can maybe tease out what some of those elements are together.
I mean, you're already taking it next level by removing this constructive feedback framing and helping all of us view it as transformational feedback and tying it into being a wise and effective change agent. If I'm a leader, a lot of the research that I've studied shows that feedback in the workplace is a critical driver for financial outcomes and having a positive organization. I find that fascinating because I'm thinking, well, who's training these individuals to offer feedback in a transformational way to where it will drive financial outcomes and a positive organization? Because a lot of people leave feedback conversations, there's the one-on-ones with your supervisor that happens, or maybe you get an annual review if you're lucky, where they'll itemize some things out, right?
Right.
And I know that the feelings that some people are left with are frustration, resentment, and demotivation.
Mm-hmm.
What are some ways, if a leader feels ill-equipped, that they can step into a transformational space where they leave someone feeling confident, supported, appreciated, engaged, and motivated?
Well, that's such a good question. And it really is tied to the conversation that we had last time, and just how do you develop presence at a very high level? And unsurprisingly, it really begins with self-reflection, right? So it's that entry point into emotional intelligence, right? That precursor to spiritual intelligence. It really is being able to step into oneself, step above oneself, and examine your own experience with the concept of this, or not the concept rather, but the skill of being able to be present and give somebody, insight that they don't have about what's currently happening in their work experience. So if we don't do that, we bring to this a lot of our own woundedness. We bring learned performances, like we bring certain masks. We think we're supposed to give this in a certain way, or et cetera. It's a I guess what I'm saying is just that we approach it from a performance perspective instead of a presence perspective. And, you can't really get into that space of having this be a transformational exchange if you yourself haven't been transformed in your thinking about what's about to happen here, right? And if you're approaching it from the very common paradigms of constructive feedback, et cetera, without questioning kind of the history and the meaning of that for you and others, then you're kind of stepping into it in a place where all you can do is repeat past experiences.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think that speaks to, for me, like in my language, intention setting ahead of time of how this is going to go. If I'm just saying it, envisioning how this is going to play out in a transformational way where the person I'm interacting with feels supported and appreciated and motivated when they leave the conversation. So then the next question would be, how does that happen if we are a leader offering feedback that I don't know how to say that, but like that doesn't feel pleasant? That isn't what if we have to have a hard conversation? What if we have to address something that most people would feel uncomfortable with and possibly conflict avoid with it, or shoot out an email or just, sign this paper, you're getting written up and I'll see you later. Or I'm just thinking of like what happens in the workplace, right? Because so how can a leader prepare for that to be transformational?
Well, I mean, there's a reason that many people call this the workplace F word, right? Like, oh my gosh, it's just as a kind of a contextual factor. About 5 years ago, when I first really started showing up in the LinkedIn world and going through a career transition myself, a career evolution, one of the ways I began connecting was just writing and publishing articles on topics like this that I thought, well, leaders might not have the same viewpoint a professor of nursing might have around some of these concepts. And so one of the first articles I wrote was, this article around how to avoid ambiguity and delays in feedback, how to really kind of overcome some of the struggles people have with that. And what was so fascinating to me was, as somebody who'd not really engaged in the LinkedIn world before, I started receiving like direct messages and emails from people that I had never known. They were, some were in my network, but some weren't. And they were sharing these trauma stories around feedback. And it really started to help me realize I tapped into a big nerve for folks. So it really put me on a journey to deconstruct for myself, well, what is the beginning of this? How do you embrace something different than what we've known if, we're trying to work within the parameters of our language? So it occurred to me we had to change the language of it in order to infuse new ideas. And the first one, you're kind of tapping into for me, I'll return to one of my favorites, Auntie Pema. I call her Auntie Pema because she is this wise, amazing thinker and writer. I'm speaking, of course, of Pema Chodron, the American Buddhist nun who taught me a really important lesson in one of her writings, which was, and I'm going to quote it because I want it to be right. The only reason we don't open our hearts and minds to other people is that they trigger confusion in us that we don't feel brave enough or sane enough to deal with. To the degree we look clearly and compassionately at ourselves, we feel confident and fearless about looking into someone else's eyes. And that really, again, it kind of ties to what I said a minute ago. The journey to do well with making this experience of feedback be transformational for others and maybe for ourselves is to begin that inward journey. And that's one of the things I love about your work in spiritual intelligence with leaders is you bring those tools to the table to help them really look at. And that very first domain is the self-awareness part. What are your values? What's your worldview? How do you see your purpose? Are you aware of the ego, right? Our selfhood and all of its sort of facets. And, you're right. The reality is that if we sit down and have a conversation and it's potentially, a quote, crucial conversation or a hard conversation in someone's minds, that's probably going to bring up for us as the provider, if we haven't really examined it, we're bringing our own wounds to the table, our own fears, our own traumas. We've probably been the recipient of poorly given feedback as well. And it makes us feel very, very nervous, and we're acting from a place of fear and suffering. Essentially, we're bringing our suffering to the table, and the goal is not to do that. So we can't do it until we really take that inner journey and really kind of become aware of what might come up for us in a conversation. So intention setting, right? You mentioned trying to approach feedback from the intention setting of, how can I be of service and help to this individual? And we also have to come into it having set the intention of, what might this bring up for me? And how am I going to be present for myself beforehand so that I can set those things aside?
I love that, because just what you're speaking to is putting your stuff to the side. It's not about you, right? It's all back to that presence conversation, that whatever is going on, it's the low self-orientation. This isn't about you. This is about having a transformational experience for someone that you're showing up for as their leader. And you referenced some skills of spiritual intelligence, which I love. One of the ones that came up for me, and I want to ask this question because we focused a lot on leaders and maybe posed some thoughts to get people thinking, how do I approach this in a transformational way when I'm giving feedback? If I'm giving feedback, hopefully you are, and you're working on your skills with that. How should I be as the person receiving feedback?
Yeah, that's a critical piece as well, right?
Yes. How can me as the receiver stay in a listening, present mode rather than switching to defense if it's something that feels uncomfortable?
Right. And in so many ways, I think that's just as equally, if not maybe a more vital part of thinking about transformational feedback, is how do I receive it? Because the purveyor of that feedback may not be highly skilled in the areas we're talking about. They may be really skilled at being very blunt, very direct, and very clear, which would actually be really helpful, because one of the big issues with feedback, often people leave feeling like they haven't heard anything of substance. They've been given these broad swaths of some sort of a personal or moral judgment, but they've received something that's not really actionable. So that could be a challenge. So leaders who actually are at least good at that can be really helpful. But, stepping into a conversation, we don't always know that we're walking into a moment of feedback. So that could be, challenging. But then getting into that sort of emotional intelligence perspective, at the very least, we should develop some skills around, well, should sounds very judgmental. We can develop some skills around being fully present for ourselves in the moment, right? So when we're on the receiving end, that's where we need to be focusing our attention, is what's happening within me emotionally. I don't want to be reactive to this. I want to be open. I want to hear what's coming at me. I want to separate what is self from what is my work. I don't want to receive this as a conversation where I feel like my identity is being attacked. And so how do I parse out what I'm receiving in a healthy way so that I respond to this well, and then can approach it from maybe more of a perspective of curiosity than self-protection? So I think it kind of begins with the inward journey of, what's happening for me in this moment. And can I articulate that to myself and hopefully to the person across the table from me, or sitting beside me, or walking beside me, however this is coming at us. So it may sound like I'm kind of speaking in a circular fashion or only talking about one dimension of this, but that self journey is really the most important one in order to even access the interactional pieces of things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. the preparation to receive feedback from a place of curiosity, I think, is a great tip just for one thing, one takeaway today that might be helpful, because it is hard to hear feedback if it doesn't feel uplifting or complimentary, right? And you just reminded me of something I heard, or I can't remember where I heard this, and you probably know this more than me, that when we're giving feedback, we absolutely should be focusing on, and help me if you know about this, we should absolutely be focusing on the task at hand. Because you brought up a person feeling attacked with their identity.
Right.
And when you said that, it struck a chord within me. Oh, that's somebody that might not be well versed in providing feedback at a high level for transformational change. Because if the recipient is feeling personally attacked, then the feedback was somehow delivered in a way that the person felt about the person rather than a task at hand at work. Or can you elaborate on that a little bit more?
Well, yeah, absolutely. I think many, many negative stories of feedback experiences, that's kind of really at the heart of it, is that people are leaving the conversation in some way feeling that their very identity or being or strengths or skills or knowledge, etc., has been attacked instead of maybe examined or approached from a perspective of curiosity. And I think that it's a little bit different than the feedback needing to feel uplifting per se or positive. I think one of the areas leaders get into trouble is some of these kind of approaches like sandwich techniques, where it's like you tell them a good thing and then you tell them the hard thing and then you tell them another good thing. And at some point, they're going to lose people in that conversation as well. It doesn't come across necessarily as genuine or authentic. It also might obscure the message. And people might leave with, well, that one thing wasn't so great, but, I left being told I was fine. So they might leave a conversation and, with the misunderstanding that they're doing well. And in fact, what their leader was trying to commit to them is some clarity around, you are not doing well, but hey, I like you. So it's kind of this messy area, right? And feedback, for it to be really transformational, it has to be really accurate. It has to be really objective. It has to be really clear. For us to receive it, we have to be open to it and understand that we're not being morally judged, but we're being shown areas where our knowledge or our skill is incomplete or only emerging or developing, or maybe it's not developing and we're stuck, right? And the brilliance, the transformational aspect of having a leader who's so willing to overcome their own fears and anxieties about this, to do that with us, has really done such an incredible service to us, really, and is showing genuine compassion because they're committed. They're showing they're committed to wanting me to be successful. So the curiosity approach of giving and receiving feedback is critical. I think another mental trick that's really helpful, or not trick, but framework, is to frame everything as learning. I don't know why we don't frame everything around giving feedback as a situation of, well, we're learning. Like we're in a mode where knowledge or skills or the application of them is somehow incomplete or insufficient to the task, and we have to figure it out together, and a leader operating from a really high sense of spiritual intelligence or high self, can sit and approach it from that perspective to say, here's what we're noticing in this aspect of your work. And it looks like this. Let me be clear. Here's some examples. And I'm really curious. I'd love to learn more about the thinking. What's happening for you when you're in this situation? Before you're behaving in this way or turning out this work product, help me understand your thinking. I'm not aware of it. I mean, many times leaders are also making a lot of assumptions, right? They're not framing this as learning, so there's no curiosity that they're bringing to the table. If that's the case, then they're also projecting a bunch of assumptions and incomplete picture of what's really happening. And that just cuts us off from other people, right? So the trick here is to step into that space where we can begin to co-examine everything and take a learning journey together. I guarantee that if you can do that with somebody and they're willing to be open with you, right, then you will learn new things that will really have challenged your own assumptions as a leader. When we look at behavior as communication and we look at performance as learning, there's just so much grace in learning, right? It's like, oh, I didn't realize you didn't know this thing, or that this skill is challenging for you and you're operating from a place of, emerging ability. How can we strengthen that? I would love to partner with you in that. And then the leader becomes more of a coach and mentor than a judge and jury.
Wow. Just everything you said was just beautiful. And I wish that you were the person giving me feedback in some situations. Thank you for sharing all of that. Gosh, that was amazing, Aaron. Just approaching feedback in a transformational way and approaching situations that we're learning. I mean, talk about wise and effective change agent. Talk about making wise and compassionate decisions from a spiritually intelligent perspective. Very, very beautiful. Well, Aaron, thank you for showing up for all of the Create Magic It listeners today and really offering your insights in this 2-part series, I'll call it, or these 2-part episodes. And anybody listening, I would encourage you to, if you're feeling like you want to make a change or you want to step into being a little bit more of a leader practicing presence, operating from your inner wisdom and compassion, I would rewind this over and over and just listen to some of the statements that Aaron has shared, because you can practice those and start integrating them into your language. The curious questions he was sharing in his feedback, you can just keep going back and listening to that and then incorporating it into your language and just try it, right? Mm-hmm. So that would be my offer or invitation at the end of this conversation. Aaron, what would your offer invitation be to everyone listening based off this topic?
Well, I think anyone who's clicked on this because they're interested in the topic is probably my kind of people. I take a very Adam Grant approach to the world. And so if people listening in are interested in connecting with me, right now I tend to do that pretty exclusively on LinkedIn. But, I have a website coming as well. It's currently in development so people can maybe more outside of the public purview of LinkedIn, reach out to me more directly. And then this has just been a topic that has come up so many times across my career that I'm very close to launching a course literally called Transformational Feedback. It will be online. It will be a static course, so people can do the learning at their own pace, et cetera. It won't be a live course. But I'm really going to take this and approach it the same way I would approach an undergraduate course in nursing communications. And really be substantive and point out like the concepts that are needed, questions people can be asking in terms of a self-reflective practice model, the kinds of what the skills really are, breaking those down for people and giving you ways to practice so that it does feel like you're moving yourself forward. I just see such a need for this. I mean, for me, this is quantum leadership. Mm-hmm. Right. So that developmental aspect of spiritual intelligence you talk about, the quantum leader, how can you take this skill set that you may have or this viewpoint of compassion and wisdom and try to multiply that out further? So for me, this is one of my altruistic efforts is to try and bring that forward for folks. So I would say those will be some of the pieces that I'm offering for folks who want to go farther.
And thank you for creating that. Thank you for offering that. I can't wait to go through the course myself. So once that is live, we'll put that in the show notes so everyone can go back and click on that, and we'll update that because, the Create Magic at Work episodes, people tend to go back and listen to them.
Yeah.
It's not just, these are sacred conversations, and we'll have that there. So thank you. Aaron,
Oh,
thank
absolutely.
you so much. Thank you for
Well, you're
bringing
welcome.
magic to everyone today. Any final thoughts before we close out?
Oh, my final thoughts before we close out. I would say just anybody listening, just be self-compassionate. Be kind to yourselves today. Whatever you're doing, you're enough. You're doing hard work, you're doing good work, and you're doing deep work. All of those things point to living a courageous life. So I would just end with a commendation. That's all I can say. I commend you for being. Thank you for being.
Thank you. We will definitely end on that. And we can't wait to have you back again. Thank you, Aaron.
I'm delighted.
Do you have this feeling that you were called to do something very special and important in the world? Do you consciously tune into something higher than yourself for guidance and inspiration? Have you had mystical or spiritual experiences that have provided guidance in your everyday life and work? If you answered yes to those 3 questions, then you are a fit for a Create Magic at Work coaching program. If you're looking to explore new frontiers in your personal and professional life, I invite you to consider stepping into one of my coaching programs. I specialize in helping people step outside of their comfort zone and embrace the unknown. Whether you're looking to launch a new business venture, navigate a major life transition, or simply push yourself to reach new heights, I can help you achieve your goals. Please schedule a complimentary consultation with me at createmagicatwork.net. Click on Work with Amy, and I can't wait to see you. Sending magic to you. I want to thank each and every one of you for coming back every week to listen to a new episode of Create Magic at Work and really helping to support and advocate for healthy leaders, workplaces, and lives for all of us. If you want any information on how to connect with me, click on the link in the show notes. You'll get access to all of the social media links for Create Magic at Work. Stay following along for more amazing episodes where we help you improve productivity and profitability in the workplace and decrease stress. Sending magic to everyone, and see you next time.